What happens when a seasoned journalist decides to corner a royal about his most controversial decisions? What unfolds when Prince Harry faces his toughest interrogation yet, only to discover that his usual charm won't save him this time? You won't believe what transpired during last night's explosive confrontation that had viewers glued to their screens and social media erupting with reactions. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when one of the most polarizing royals meets his match in the form of George Stephanopoulos. The tension was palpable from the moment Prince Harry walked onto the set last night. Anyone watching could sense something was different about this appearance. Gone was the carefully orchestrated media tour atmosphere that had surrounded his previous interviews. Instead, Stephanopoulos had clearly done his homework, and the gloves were coming off from the very first question. "Your Royal Highness, thank you for joining us," Stephanopoulos began, his tone polite but with an edge that veteran viewers of the show immediately recognized. "I want to start with something that's been troubling many Americans who supported you and Meghan during your transition away from royal duties." Harry shifted slightly in his chair, already sensing this wasn't going to be the softball session his PR team had likely promised him. "Of course, George. I'm happy to address any concerns." But Stephanopoulos wasn't interested in pleasantries. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "You've made millions of dollars criticizing your own family, sharing private conversations, and airing what many would consider deeply personal grievances on the most public platforms possible. Yet you continue to use your royal titles and trade on your royal connections for profit. How do you reconcile that contradiction?" The question hit like a sledgehammer. Harry's media-trained smile faltered for just a moment before he attempted to regain his composure. "I think that's a rather harsh characterization of what we've been trying to do, which is simply tell our truth and—" "Your truth?" Stephanopoulos interrupted, his eyebrows raised. "That's an interesting phrase, because what I'm hearing from you is that when it benefits you financially, you're Prince Harry, son of King Charles, member of the royal family. But when it comes to the responsibilities and discretion that traditionally come with those titles, suddenly you're just Harry, a private citizen who can say whatever he wants about anyone he wants." The studio audience was dead silent. This wasn't the gentle probing they were accustomed to seeing. This was a direct challenge, and everyone could feel the atmosphere in the room shift dramatically. Harry's jaw tightened visibly. "George, I think you're misunderstanding the situation entirely. We never asked to be born into this institution. We were trying to find a way to serve while also being able to support ourselves financially without being a burden to British taxpayers." "But you're not supporting yourselves through service, are you?" Stephanopoulos shot back immediately. "You're supporting yourselves by violating the privacy of your family members, sharing conversations that any reasonable person would expect to remain private, and capitalizing on family trauma for Netflix specials and best-selling memoirs." The color was beginning to rise in Harry's cheeks. His handlers in the wings were probably having heart attacks, but there was nowhere to run. The cameras were rolling, and America was watching. "I have every right to tell my story," Harry said, his voice taking on a defensive tone that was becoming increasingly familiar to anyone who'd followed his media appearances over the past few years. "Your story?" Stephanopoulos pressed. "Or your family stories? Because last I checked, when you share private conversations with your father and your brother, when you detail private family meetings and personal struggles of other family members who haven't consented to having their private moments broadcast to the world, that's not just your story anymore, is it?" Harry was clearly growing agitated. The practiced calm he'd maintained through previous interviews was beginning to crack. "My family had every opportunity to support us when we needed it most. Instead, they chose to—" "They chose what, exactly?" Stephanopoulos interrupted again, his voice rising slightly. "To expect you to follow the same rules that every other member of the royal family follows? To maintain some degree of privacy about internal family matters? To not monetize your royal connections while simultaneously trashing the institution that gave you those connections in the first place?" The confrontation was escalating rapidly, and it was clear that neither man was backing down. Harry's media training was warring with his genuine anger, and the cracks were starting to show in ways that would have his PR team scrambling. "You don't understand what it's like to be trapped in that system," Harry said, his voice becoming more strained with each word. But Stephanopoulos wasn't having it. He had done his research, and he was just getting started. The real fireworks were yet to come, and everyone in that studio could sense that they were witnessing something unprecedented unfold before their eyes. "Let's talk specifics then, shall we?" Stephanopoulos continued, pulling out a stack of papers that he set deliberately on his desk. The rustling sound seemed to echo through the silent studio. "You say you were trapped, but you had options. You could have stepped back quietly, like other royals have done. Instead, you chose the most public, most lucrative, and frankly, most vindictive path possible." Harry's hands were now gripping the arms of his chair. "Vindictive? That's completely unfair and—" "Is it?" Stephanopoulos cut him off sharply. "Let me read you something. This is from your book, your own words." William looked right through me, his face red with anger. "You then go on to describe in intimate detail a private argument with your brother about your wife. Tell me, Harry, did William consent to having that private moment shared with millions of readers around the world?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Harry's mouth opened and closed, clearly struggling to find an answer that wouldn't make him look worse. The silence stretched on uncomfortably long. We felt it was important for people to understand the context of what we were going through," Harry finally managed, but his voice lacked conviction. Stephanopoulos leaned back in his chair, a look of barely contained incredulity crossing his face. "The context? Harry, you threw your brother under the bus for book sales. You violated his privacy, exposed his personal struggles, and painted him as the villain in your story. And you did it all while he was preparing to become the future King of England, dealing with his own family responsibilities. William has people protecting him," Harry snapped, his composure finally cracking in a way that sent shockwaves through the studio. "He has the entire institution behind him. What did I have?" "You had your family," Stephanopoulos shot back immediately, his voice rising to match Harry's intensity. "You had people who loved you, who wanted to support you, but instead of working within the system or finding private solutions, you chose to burn it all down publicly. And for what? Money? Revenge? Because that's what this looks like from the outside." Harry was on his feet now, pacing behind his chair like a caged animal. The cameras followed his every movement, capturing the raw emotion that was spilling out uncontrolled. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said, pointing an accusatory finger at Stephanopoulos. "You sit here in your comfortable studio, making judgments about a situation you could never understand." "Then help me understand," Stephanopoulos challenged, standing up as well. "Help me understand how sharing private text messages from your sister-in-law, revealing private medical information about family members, and detailing personal conversations with your dying grandmother somehow makes you the victim in this story." The mention of his grandmother seemed to hit Harry like a physical blow. His face flushed red with anger. "Don't you dare bring my grandmother into this. She understood what we were going through." "Did she?" Stephanopoulos pressed relentlessly. "Because from what I understand, she was quite hurt by some of your public statements. In fact, didn't she specifically ask you not to use certain recordings in your Netflix series?" Harry's eyes flashed with genuine fury. "That's private information, and you have no right to—" "Private?" Stephanopoulos laughed bitterly. "That's rich, coming from you. You've made a career out of exposing private information. The difference is, when someone does it to you, suddenly privacy matters again." The confrontation had reached a fever pitch. Harry was visibly shaking with anger, his carefully crafted public persona completely stripped away. The studio audience was watching in stunned silence as one of the most famous royals in the world completely lost his composure on live television. "You know what your real problem is, George?" Harry said, his voice dripping with venom. "You can't stand that someone finally told the truth about that institution. You're so invested in the fairy tale that you can't handle the reality." Stephanopoulos smiled coldly. "The truth? Is that what we're calling it? Because I've got some truth for you right here." He picked up another document from his stack. "This is a statement from palace staff members who worked with you during your final years as a working royal. Would you like me to read what they have to say about your version of the truth?" Harry's face went ashen. The color drained from his cheeks as he realized Stephanopoulos had sources he hadn't anticipated. "You can't. Those are private personnel matters." "Private?" Stephanopoulos laughed harshly. "Harry, You forfeited any right to privacy when you decided to air everyone else's dirty laundry in public. These staff members have every right to defend themselves against the accusations you made in your book." Without waiting for permission, Stephanopoulos began reading from the document. Quote, "Prince Harry's claims about being ignored or unsupported are categorically false. Multiple departments worked tirelessly to accommodate his requests, including substantial resources dedicated to his personal projects. His characterization of staff as obstructive is deeply unfair and factually incorrect." End quote. Harry was now pacing frantically, his hands running through his hair. "Stop! Just fucking stop reading that shit." The profanity hung in the air, and several audience members gasped audibly. Stephanopoulos raised an eyebrow but continued mercilessly. "Oh, we're just getting started," Stephanopoulos said, flipping to another page. "Here's another one. The prince consistently arrived late to meetings, often canceled important engagements at the last minute, and showed little respect for the staff who worked overtime to support his initiatives. His claims of being marginalized are contradicted by the extensive efforts made to include him in decision-making processes." "Those are lies!" Harry exploded, spinning around to face Stephanopoulos directly. "Complete fucking lies! You're just trying to destroy me because you can't handle someone telling the truth about your precious monarchy." Stephanopoulos stood up slowly, his expression deadly serious. "Your precious monarchy? Harry, that's your family we're talking about. Those are your people, your heritage, your legacy. And you've spent the last 3 years systematically destroying all of it for profit." "They destroyed me first," Harry screamed, completely losing all composure, his voice cracked with emotion, years of suppressed anger pouring out uncontrolled. "They hung me out to dry. They fed me to the wolves while protecting everyone else." "No, Harry," Stephanopoulos said quietly, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You destroyed yourself. You had everything handed to you on a silver platter. Respect, love, purpose, a platform to make real change. And you threw it all away because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention anymore." The accusation hit Harry like a physical blow. He staggered slightly, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what it's like to live in that goldfish bowl." "I know what it's like to have integrity," Stephanopoulos replied coldly. "I know what it's like to tell difficult truths without destroying innocent people in the process. And I know what it's like to take responsibility for my actions instead of blaming everyone else for my problems." Harry's eyes filled with tears of rage and frustration. "Fuck this, fuck you, and fuck this whole goddamn interview." He began ripping off his microphone with shaking hands. "Running away again?" Stephanopoulos called out, as Harry fumbled with the wire. "Just like you ran from your responsibilities? Just like you ran from your family when things got tough?" "I'm done," Harry said through gritted teeth, finally freeing himself from the microphone and throwing it onto the floor. The device hit with a sharp crack that echoed through the stunned studio. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this character assassination." "Character assassination?" Stephanopoulos repeated incredulously. "Harry, I'm simply asking you to account for your own actions and words. If that feels like character assassination to you, maybe the problem isn't with my questions." But Harry was already storming toward the exit, his face red with humiliation and fury. As he reached the edge of the set, he turned back one final time, his voice shaking with emotion. "You know what, George? You and everyone else can go straight to hell. I told my truth, and if you can't handle it, that's your problem, not mine." "Your truth isn't the only truth, Harry," Stephanopoulos called after him. "And someday, you're going to have to face that reality." Harry didn't respond. He pushed through the studio doors with such force that they slammed against the walls, the sound reverberating through the silent studio like a gunshot. Security personnel quickly followed him out as the cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of the dramatic exit. Stephanopoulos stood alone on the set, straightening his papers calmly as if nothing unusual had happened. The studio audience sat in complete silence, still processing what they had just witnessed. "Well," Stephanopoulos said finally, looking directly into the camera with the composure of a seasoned professional, "I think that tells us everything we need to know about Prince Harry's commitment to accountability and honest dialogue." The cameras faded to black, but the damage was already done. Social media was exploding with clips of Harry's meltdown, his profanity-laced outburst, and his dramatic storming off set. The interview that was supposed to rehabilitate his image had instead become the most damaging public relations disaster of his post-royal career. In those final moments before the broadcast ended, viewers across America had witnessed something unprecedented. A member of the British royal family completely losing control, abandoning all pretense of dignity, and revealing the entitled, volatile personality that his carefully managed public image had hidden for so long. The confrontation was over, but its effects would reverberate for months to come, forever changing how the public viewed the self-exiled prince who had traded his birthright for fame and fortune, only to discover that neither could shield him from the consequences of his choices.